Hi, welcome to Starwell Astrology. Today, we're going to talk about Pluto and shadow work through all 12 houses. Pluto is one of the most feared planets because he's beyond our ability to fully understand his archetype and know his full energetic potentials. He's the planet responsible for our biggest transformation. Pluto is the last visible planet, outer planet, furthest from us here on Earth, which shows us how unattainable he really is. Although he has been downgraded to the status of a dwarf planet, anyone who studies astrology knows that he packs the biggest punch in his influences are undeniable. He also demonstrates, based on his placement in the sky, that he is the boundary between the third dimension and the higher dimensions or heavenly realms. So, before we dive into more on Pluto, let me let me introduce myself. My name is Sherry, and I am a Western tropical astrologer, and I specialize in shadow work. I do natal chart readings, and I also offer one-on-one shadow work coaching. My information is below. So let's dive into Pluto. Pluto has an orbit of 248 years, and he follows an elliptical path around the sun. He stays in any one sign anywhere from 12 to 30 years. So we only get to experience Pluto in a handful of signs during each lifetime. So the house that he falls in is where we will probably find the most meaning, because otherwise the sign he falls in is generational. Pluto is about our soul. He represents divine will or our higher will. Our will is located in our gut center, and Mars, who is regarded as Pluto's little brother, is our personal will. So Mars deals with our physical body and our will to survive. Mars is that gut instinct that allow us to have the impulse for life. But Pluto deals with the invisible realms, and his function is at a soul level. So he is the desire of the soul, because most of us are not conscious of our soul. We do not heed to Pluto's demands, mostly because we're not aligned in his energetic vibrations. And in order to do that, we have to be in touch with ourselves at a soul level. But ultimately, Pluto is the soul's desire, and it's a deep urge. We can find this in our gut center at a deeper level. When we are really listening, paying attention to this, it's really a divine call of the soul. And it is an intense urge for us to seek higher knowledge, higher wisdom, higher power, a source, God, the absolute, whatever you want to call something that we know is greater than ourselves. So Pluto rules desires, but unfortunately, we pervert and disperse these desires through obsessions, power plays, power struggles, domination, wanting to dominate others, and even our lust. But Pluto's urge is the call of the soul to seek out answers to ourselves, to know thyself, and ultimately to awaken to Christ consciousness within us through an inner transformation and rebirthing process. As we know, Pluto also rules transformation and rebirthing. And in order to do that, we have to face Pluto. He won't just give us a free pass to walk through the gates to the other side, to the higher dimensions. We need to face our darkness. And the reason we're facing our darkness is because our soul stores a lot of wounded patterns that we keep repeating consciously or unconsciously. So instead of facing our Pluto, though, we tend to distort this message and go for the superficial expressions of his energetic desires, because Pluto, it rules desires, and he wants to attain things. But we do this in a superficial way. So we want to transform ourselves through wealth and power and control and leadership. But the ultimate purpose of Pluto is not so much for the superficial things. That's an added bonus if that's what we happen to get through. But he is really inviting us to face our deep darkness, our hidden side and unconscious side, so that we can heal our shadow self. And by healing our shadows, we get to the deeper dimensions within us. So Pluto guards the gates to the higher dimensions. He is the god of Hades. He guards the gates that we cannot get through until we work with him. We can only truly work with Pluto at a soul level. And that's why he is a difficult planet to get to know, because he doesn't really communicate on this physical level. His communication comes through spiritual guidance, through the higher realms. This comes from following our gut instincts, but from a higher level rather than feeding our carnal desires, we're feeding our spiritual desires. And this is not really an easy place to get to. Pluto can be destructive. It can lead to addictions, crisis, terror, trauma in our lives. But his aim is to get our attention so that we look deeper within and get to know who we are at a soul level. His power is misunderstood and misused for worldly gains, power, and control. And that is all good, but we really need to go deeper inwards and face our shadows first to transform through emotional healing at a soul level. So when we receive blessings from Pluto, we can use it responsibly. Otherwise, it gets misused so that in turn recreate even more emotional wounds that burden our souls even further. We'll get to repeat the same cycle of wounding until we face our fears and heal at a soul level. To know what we're here to work on, we can look at the house that Pluto falls in. Please remember that the entire chart must be considered to fully understand the message of Pluto. But Pluto's placement gives us an added layer of understanding in our natal chart. So we can do this by using the whole sign system, or my preference is Placidus, but I do recommend that you look at both and see which resonates with you, or I have found that both work. So it's a matter of just playing with it and self-investigate and try to understand if you see it in both, or if one feels stronger to you than the other. Sometimes these things are unconscious, so it's a matter of making them conscious. The house that Pluto falls in is where we experience deep fears and phobias, and it is usually a part of our unconscious memory stored in emotional wounds. Now, to break this down a little further, our emotions are connected to our memories that we store sometimes consciously, but mostly we store them unconsciously. Why is this important? Because Pluto represents the soul's wounded and unhealed memories. Pluto rules our emotional memories, which is mostly unprocessed and repressed wounds from traumatic experiences in our past, or in our past lives, or in our ancestry line, or even on a collective level. If you want more information on this, my previous video spoke about that in more detail. Pluto is one of the most prominent planets, shows us a direct connection to healing through shadow work. All planets can help, but Pluto specifically is very connected to our emotional wounds and shadow work. So awareness of our fears and phobias due to Pluto's placement is an area we can seriously consider. Pluto might give us intense experiences in that area of life. Sometimes the things we fear are unconscious, so we might not always see things clearly, but might find that we attract events in our lives that will force us to transform or face the destructive force of Pluto. So look at your natal chart, see the house that Pluto is located in, and it will show you the area of life that you need to work on healing and transforming, to work with Pluto's energetic influence. By working with Pluto through shadow work, we can transform and develop on a more spiritual level through healing. So now let's look at Pluto through each house. Pluto in the first house, especially if it's on the ascendant, is a very powerful position. And although this is a very powerful position, it is not an easy position to work with Pluto, because Pluto on the ascendant is being projected through you, and others will feel the magnetic draw of this powerful Pluto on your ascendant. Even if it's in the first house, this can still be difficult. A lot of times when we have Pluto, especially close to the ascendant, we've had difficult experiences very early in life. And this is meant to really transform us at the deepest level. But Pluto needs you to transform at a soul level, which is even more challenging than just transforming at the level of the personality. Because remember, Pluto rules the soul and he wants us to transform. And the first house is you as the ego identity that has a personality. And Pluto really wants us to break through that shell, that mask, that identity, and know who you are at your core level. However, he'll bring a lot of challenging situations that you'll need to face in order to get to this state in yourself. Pluto also will strip away the ego and the personality so that you face yourself at your core level. Pluto in the first house, when especially close to the ascendant, but anywhere really in the first house, is especially intense. And this makes the person very magnetic. And they can also attract experiences that brings them into positions of power and money and leadership. And if they're not ready for this, they tend to abuse this power and may violate this energy or this power and control by being demanding or controlling or manipulative. And this also will cause power struggles with other people. They exude power and sexual appeal with Pluto in this placement. And they also have a very controlled appearance of being powerful and magnetic in the presence of other people. And some find this appealing. But this intense, penetrating, mesmerizing presence can cause some to feel uncomfortable in their company because they have such a deep penetrating presence that people feel like they're peering down into their souls, and it's not necessarily a comfortable feeling. Now, there can be phobias and fears and even paranoias around one's own ability to stay in control because Pluto is a very intense, obsessive energy. But this position, although powerful, like I said, can be very challenging because Pluto is very demanding of the person with this placement. And if it has positive aspects, it's much easier to work with Pluto here. But if there are less harmonious aspects like squares and oppositions, then Pluto has more challenges in this placement. However, should you get through the obstacles and the destructive forces of Pluto in this first house, you are able to heal in a way that you can empower others. And if you manage to work in positions as a psychologist or a psychiatrist or someone who can psychoanalyze the mind, or even an astrologer or a traditional or holistic healer, you can help others to transform through facing their own darknesses once you have done this for yourself. Shadow work and Pluto in the first house. They're meant to learn about the darkness or the shadow side by learning to acknowledge and work with their shadow self. They have to face their psychological wounds, their fears, their phobias, and also allow what is unconscious to come to the surface so that they can face that part of themselves and integrate it, allow it to be there. They need to also be able to face their reality and not sugarcoat it, even though it's unlikely that with this placement that you'll even have the desire to sugarcoat things, because this is such a deep and intense position that it's not a light energy. So the person will feel like they need to face their reality. And however, it comes with the responsibility of being able to work with the higher expression of Pluto. And if you're willing to do the shadow work, to face your fears, face your challenges, your situation, face yourself as an ego and a personality, and how you're operating in the world, trying to control or manipulate others, or obsess about your own desires, or try to be too controlling and narrow about your focus, then if you're able to face this in yourself and integrate it in a way that's healthy for you to operate more at your core essence, then you're working with your Pluto through shadow work. Pluto and the second house. A strong will and a resourceful nature is the characteristic of Pluto in the second house, since they often have a knack for making money in unconventional ways or insightful ways, particularly when they have like a passionate desire for whatever it is that they're focusing on. They remember Pluto is very penetrating, concentrated energy. So if they are focused on something in a very determined way, they're likely to get there. And in the second house, the focus will be on resources, money, possessions, and also their own values. So with this position, you can have a Midas touch, especially if Pluto has trines and sextiles from this placement, and they're able to get to the money or the wealth or the power of having possessions with this placement. Pluto in the second house also, though, if it's less favorably aspected, so it's squares and oppositions. Most people have a balance of both. Very few people have all of one or all of the other. Most times there's a blend of two energies. But should there be less harmonious aspects from your Pluto, then they might be plagued with fears and phobias around financial losses. And this can drive them to make money and material wealth, and even become very obsessed about securing and increasing their financial situation. It is crucial for individuals with this placement to be cautious that their desires for wealth don't lead them down the wrong path, where they can engage in criminal activity for financial gains. So it's very important with Pluto in the second house to be aware of these tendencies, and then instead strive to channel their intense drive into ethical and productive endeavors to avoid the potential pitfalls of this house. Pluto in the second house might have traumatic experiences around money, where they have had to overcome major transformations around their possessions and wealth. In other words, they may have had huge gains and then huge losses that require them to transform how they value themselves through the basis of their possessions. With Pluto in the second house, you can be born in situations where you've had to strive to earn money, and but you're determined, because Pluto makes you determined to get to whatever it is that you want to possess in this house. And so getting there makes you even more obsessed about keeping what you have. And therefore, once this money is earned, they can use this to dominate, manipulate, and control others. Pluto's influence in the second house can lead to crisis or wounds around self-worth, resulting in power struggles, jealousy, obsessions related to wealth, sex, and even violence, because Pluto rules sex. And also they can use this as a way to dominate those that they love. This placement sees themselves in the world based on the resources they possess. And interestingly, they can be very passionate lovers, because Pluto rules passion, and it's a Venus ruled house. They can have obsessions around their relationships, and they tend to want to possess that person in the relationship. And this can cause a lot of jealousy and power struggles in the relationship. They tend to want to possess, dominate, and control another because they see them as their possession. They tend to identify with those they love in such passionate ways that they believe that the person they love belongs to them. Pluto in the second house often brings a profound transformation in how one handles material possessions and financial matters. Individuals with this placement may find themselves drawn to investments, loans, shared resources, including those acquired through marriage. And managing people's money, such as through loans and investments, can be a very significant aspect in their life. In shadow work with Pluto in the second house, they will need to work on their own self-worth, because shadow work is not so much about the things out there that you possess, but it's an internal process. And so one would want to look at their own values and their own self-worth, how it is that they're weighing themselves against another, and instead focus inwards on understanding that instead of reaching and grabbing for the external things to possess and to have and to hold, instead turn that attention inwards and realize that they are their best resource. They are the biggest value they can have for themselves. They need to learn to no longer define themselves through their materialistic gains that is really unsustainable anyway, and eventually learn that the wanting for more is really a desire to seek more of themselves. It's not more of attainments out there. It's more of seeking an inward understanding of themselves and understanding that they are the gold that they are searching for, and it cannot be attained through external means. So through real self-investigation, they'll understand that the desire to seek, possess, own, grasp, reach for it is an external fixation that they're conditioned to follow because that's what happens in this world. But if they are understanding how to work with themselves, they turn that reaching and grasping and the desire to possess back into themselves and understand that they are their greatest value and source of possession. Anything that they have out there cannot meet what they already are inside of themselves. Pluto in the third house. This placement will have a very investigative mind. They are deep thinkers. They might even love astrology and the mysteries and deep secrets, occult knowledge, esotericism, and they're curious about exploring new ideas. The third house is a Gemini house, so it's a very mental house. And with Pluto there, you want to like dig deep, and Pluto likes to go deep down. It needs to dig. It needs to excavate. So with this placement, they are not going to want superficial surface information and knowledge. They want the deep, mysterious, hidden information. And so they might be interested in researching and learning about these topics that I just mentioned, the esotericism and, astrology. That's an occult topic that requires a lot of deep self-investigation, even though we can learn it first on a more superficial level to really get astrology. It's a deep internal process. And also they're able to work with their own minds on a psychological level because this is the third house, so that's your own mindset. They love to psychoanalyze, and they are able to concentrate for a very long time because Pluto is a very focused energy. They're not very trusting of the information they receive. That's Pluto. He doesn't trust much. And they need to seek out answers for themselves So that's why they tend to do a lot of research to understand things at the deepest level. They don't want the surface meaning. So they have an intense obsession and a relentless mind also, though, that can get stuck in the same patterns because they're very mentally focused, and it's such an intense process that the mind can get very centered around the same thoughts over and over again. They have an intense focus when it comes to their passions, especially if it's centered around intense dark thoughts, exploring secrets, and investigating private matters. This is what allows them to stay open to deep psychological exploration. They don't care for the empty conversations or the gossip. They want deep and profound, meaningful conversations about topics that they find interesting. Pluto in the third house might be plagued with fearful thoughts because Pluto is the planet of phobias and fears, and this is the mind. So this is work that they need to do to face their own phobias by exploring their own thought processes, noticing the patterns, the mental thought patterns that are repeating in their mind. This placement could experience a crisis with a sibling or a relative, because third house rules siblings and relatives. And if Pluto has less harmonious aspects, then there could be issues around sexual assault with a sibling or a close relative, or there could be some secrets with a sibling or a close relative, or they could have experiences with traumatic events in their closest environment, such as possible disasters or something destructive or explosive or some kind of poison or toxins in their close environments, their community, or their neighborhood. But this is an excellent placement for those who want to help others through healing the mind, psychology, or to psychoanalyze the mind. And this is because they have a very deep and penetrating mind. So they have an intense desire to heal their minds. And this placement is perfect for shadow work. When Pluto is in the third house, it's an excellent position to allow the person to really investigate their own mindset, explore themselves and their own thought processes, witness the emotional link to their repetitive thought patterns. And with the third house ruling the mind, and Pluto is and also an emotional planet, an intensely emotional planet that is linked to deep wounding at a soul level. This position is perfect for that type of exploration. So with self-investigation, they can begin to witness their own patterns and notice their obsessive thinking, and witnessing the feelings that get triggered based on these repetitive thoughts. They get in touch with what is triggered, what is coming up for them. And if they can really isolate that feeling, they can streamline it or investigate this all the way down to its core and understand its roots at the deepest level, because Pluto is willing to investigate and to dig deep. So once they're able to excavate their own wounding, they can bring it up and become aware of what it is that's unconsciously ruling a lot of their repetitive, wounded thought patterns, which essentially is what shadow work is about. And they're especially able to journal, write, because this is the third house, write down what it is that they're thinking and then associate it with what they're feeling, and then explore this and really get to a really deep part in themselves. Pluto in the fourth house. This is a more difficult placement for Pluto because this is linked to our family, and Pluto holds a lot of secrets that get buried with the whole family. And a lot of times there's a lot of shame involved, so we want to keep them hidden, out of reach. So these tend to be deep ancestral wounds that have been passed down through the generations. And there can be like repeated abuse of all sorts, from emotional, physical, verbal abuse, from that has gone through many life cycles, and it's buried so deep in the psyche that, or the unconscious memory of those in this family, that it gets repeated automatically through each lifetime. There can also be a lot of power struggles with family members, and the fourth house rules the mother, and, or it's debatable, but some say father, but I tend to look at the fourth house as the mother. And this means that the mothers can want to hold on to secrets for the family. And she also can be very controlling and possessive of the family, and wanting to dominate, especially her children. A mother who is sort of very involved in their day-to-day business, has a lot of demands on the child, and a lot of possessiveness. Also, with this position, there can be deep wounding around abuse and addictions that run through the family, because Pluto is addictive behavior, fourth house is family. Also, on a more positive side, somewhat, is that the family could be wealthy and powerful, but also, even with this wealth and power, there could be the demand that the family stays with whatever traditions they have organized themselves through having this power. So if, for example, you're born into a political family that has wealth and power, then the expectation is put on you. So there's a lot of demands around you becoming a politician too. So you sort of need to fall in line. And so that could be placed on you. If Pluto also has less harmonious aspects, the family could be linked to crime and corruption. And also, this placement could have dealt with a lot of death with family members. So Pluto, though, in the fourth house, gives this person a lot of power to be able to transform at the deepest level. They came into this world carrying the karma of their family, and have allowed themselves the potential for being able to heal the whole family. Because with Pluto in the fourth house, the power is there, and it's the root and the foundation of the chart. And when you are dealing with Pluto, as I said, it's the soul level, it's transformation. It also wants you to go to the roots. It wants you to go to the foundation, and it wants you to dig. And the fourth house is the roots and the foundation of the chart. So it allows you to excavate all the deep buried wounds of many lifetimes of your family. That is, some of it could even be unconscious. All of what I said could even be an unconscious thing in the family, where there's all these dynamics around control and abuse and secrets, but you're not even aware of it. But with doing shadow work, you can excavate these wounded parts and heal your old wounded patterns that you are unconsciously repeating through the generational cycle, and break the cycle with you, and therefore heal the future generations in your own family ancestry line. Especially if there's harmonious aspects, they can have great experiences with their children and those they love. And they also can be very passionate about being a good parent. Fifth house is about romance and love, so they can be very passionate, caring lovers who want a deep and intense connection in romance and in love. And they have a deep desire for intimate bonding at the deepest level. It's almost like they want a soul bonding. If Pluto has less harmonious aspects, there can be power struggles with their children, by placing their own control and intense demands on their children. As far as love and romance, there can be an addiction to dating and changing out lovers, trying to find the right one. There can be an obsession around finding the right romantic partner. They might also be an obsession with not just love, but having fun and gambling and taking risks, and also having a lot of partners for sex. And they might have fun taking risks. They can be demanding and possessive with their loved ones, and they might want to dominate others through sex, violence, abuse, jealousy, and obsessive behavior around control. Equally, they can attract someone who might want to manipulate and control them, maybe even violate them sexually, because fifth house also rules sex. They can have fears and phobias around having children or falling in love, or even fears around sexual encounters. They can also have secret love. Pluto in the fifth house can express themselves creatively through something that is more dark and taboo, or has like a sexual nature to it, dark art with some kind of sexual connotations. These are just a few examples of Pluto in the fifth house. Now, Pluto in the fifth house and shadow work, the love that they seek from others, they really need to discover first in themselves by learning to love themselves unconditionally. And I know a lot of people hear this, that we should love ourselves, and then we all think we love ourselves. But until we really do shadow work, we don't know what this is. We just think we know what it is. So with this placement, the work is to really self-investigate and really get to know who you are at your core, not your personality, because that is wishy-washy. It's always changing. It's always striving for something new. It always needs this, that, and the other, and everything is externalized with the personality. But Pluto is the soul, and it is who you are at your core essence. And with this position, the love that you're looking for is the one that you need to discover in yourself first. And this incessant desire to find love out there needs to be turned inwards, back to yourself, and to begin to know yourself unconditionally and accept all parts of yourself unconditionally. Fifth house is also a creative house, and it's a house of the inner child. And with Pluto in the fifth house, you can have access to your inner child, the part of you that's curious and open and willing to try new things and to play and to really go back to your child self and reflect there on who you were then and how curious and open you were to life, and to integrate that into your now adult life. Because at that point in your childhood, there was full acceptance of who you were. There was no judgment on yourself. And to return to that, understand that, and heal from that awareness that is naturally built into you. And you can even find this through some kind of creative expression. Find the child in you through some kind of creative expression. Pluto in the sixth house, we might have fears and phobias around work and health. We might have some type of obsessive thoughts around health, maybe some anxiety around health, and even our day-to-day routines and also our work environment. Pluto in the sixth house can suffer from job loss and health issues and have intense anxiety around these areas. And it doesn't mean that you're conscious of it. It just means that there's an inner angst that maybe you don't pay attention to, or you don't understand, or you think it's normal. And until you do the work to really pay attention, you don't even notice that this is an intense feeling that holds a lot of fears and phobias around just your day-to-day life. So with Pluto in this placement, there could actually be some kind of loss of job, or you're having to overcome some kind of health crisis, because Pluto does bring experiences that you are meant to heal from. And this could even cause further anxiety and fears and doubt about life in general. But instead of allowing the fears and the doubt to manipulate how you are choosing to live, Pluto really wants you to transform and heal through your own health crises, or through fears of poverty, or also fears of being in debt, fears of financial problems. So we need to learn how to heal and overcome this overwhelming feeling of not being able to stay open to life in the everyday situations that we have to face. Pluto can cause a crisis that will force you to face potential poverties, or Pluto might put you in a position where you become unconscious of how you are overspending and creating your own debt. Pluto is the house about habits, so poor spending habits is one of them, or even an addiction to food or drugs. Because you're trying to cope with your fears and your phobias, you turn to negative habits. Of course, this depends on aspects that Pluto is making. If it's less harmonious, then we tend to have the lower qualities of Pluto in this house. If it's a more harmonious aspects to Pluto, then we usually can become very regimented and strict about our own health, or have a lot of discipline about our day-to-day routines. So the sixth house also rules our obsessive energy. And with this placement, if it's imbalanced or less harmonious, we can also micromanage, manipulate others, or try to control co-workers. Or if we are the employer, we try to control the employee. There's an intense obsession to control the work environment, and this can cause conflicts with your co-workers, or if you are the employer, then your employees. They might also be workaholics and might impose high demands on those that they work with. As an employee, there might be conflicts and problems with coworkers, or you might attract an employee or employer who is abusive or corrupt. Pluto in the sixth house, you can even become the victim of sexual abuse, because yourself in a position of having to keep it as a secret, because Pluto rules secrets. And you could also have secret affairs at work. In a more harmonious way, though, Pluto can transform your work environment. You can use the potential of Pluto to transform your work environment and implement efficient methods and solutions that can be helpful. Also, Pluto rules diseases, so there can be an obsession around being healthy to prevent diseases. So you do what's necessary to make sure that you're as healthy as possible. And this placement usually makes excellent healers, people who want to be of service and heal others and share their own healing techniques with others. This placement you can find healthy solutions to your daily routine. They might find holistic ways to heal. Since with this placement, conventional methods might be a huge concern, so they'll want a more natural approach. Pluto in the sixth house might become very disciplined with health regimens. And by operating on a schedule or some kind of planned routine, can regulate some of their affairs. And when they learn to work with Pluto, they might have an interest, based on their own experiences, to end health crises and disease and struggle with poverty. Pluto in the sixth house can be of service and help to others and become great healers, or develop an interest in transforming socioeconomic problems, or find powerful solutions that serve the underprivileged or underserved. Now, Pluto here, we want to control things as they unfold. However, Pluto, a desire for us is to transform our lives, find healthy ways to feed our passions, and also find solutions that are helpful for us in a holistic way in our day-to-day life. Shadow work with Pluto in the sixth house. Although the sixth house is a simple house, it's not easy because it rules so many things. And particularly when it comes to shadow work, you're going to be required to face your fears and phobias and to notice the undercurrents of your anxiety around health and work routines and the need and the desire to control life. There's like this intense struggle with letting things go and surrendering to what is here and now. And the need to control is so strong that we're unaware of the incessant need to manipulate everything so that we feel like everything is comfortable for us. But we have to be able to surrender and make enough space to stay open and allow things to unfold naturally. And the lesson here is to learn that not everything is in our hands, and grasping at what we have no control over is exhausting. And not only that, it brings a lot of anxiety into our bodies, and we will never feel fulfilled that way. So, awareness of this tendency is the way through it. We accept that it is a part of our program behavior, and we allow ourselves to witness ourselves in action and notice how we might fall short of our high expectations for perfection. And then we learn to surrender to this. The obsessive grasping at everything leaves us feeling powerless instead of empowered. And though this is not easy, because Pluto in the sixth house does not relax easily, because they're always thinking about planning and wanting things to fall in line as they see fit. And learning to surrender is a huge benefit for this placement. They need to allow the present moment to be enough and allow things to unfold naturally. Once they have taken the necessary action, I'm not saying sit around and hope things falls into place, but once they know they have taken the necessary action, then they have to allow enough space for things to unfold as they should, and release some of that compulsive control and allow themselves to somehow accept and rest in the present moment. And our awareness of the obsessive tendency is the gateway to healing. So even if you don't feel that you can do all of what I'm saying, your awareness is the gateway. It allows you to start to witness yourself doing all the grasping and clutching. And once you become aware, you have a chance to begin to integrate it by acknowledging this intense need for control. So with Pluto in the sixth house, we just need to learn how to stay present in each moment. It's the house of your day-to-day routine. So staying present to each moment as you're living it and allowing things to be as they are is the work of Pluto in the sixth house. Pluto in the seventh house. This can be where the person with this placement can have a dominating and controlling partner, or they themselves can be dominating and controlling to their partner. They can be possessive and intense, and there's this love-hate dynamic in the relationship around jealousy and possessiveness, and with strong desires for the merging of the relationship. But there's the challenge of Pluto bringing in the feeling of being suspicious of their partner. So they also are going to attract partners that they feel suspicious of, mostly because they don't trust themselves, or they themselves shouldn't be trusted because they're the ones creating the issues in the relationship, but reflects this onto their own partner in some kind of unconscious way. So there's a need, though, for this placement to compromise, and it's not really going to be an easy thing for them because Pluto is a very extreme planet. And when it comes to emotions, especially in the seventh house, um, because Pluto also is an emotional planet. And when it comes to the seventh house, where there are relationships involved and involves an intimate situation, then this becomes very challenging for the person with Pluto in this house to just open and allow that person in without having a lot of safeguards around themselves. And like I said, this comes from Pluto being a very suspicious planet, even though the truth is that on the deepest level, Pluto really wants the deepest possible relationship, and they want to merge deeply and intimately with their partner. But the intense feeling of this desire in the background also is a bit scary. So they put up the guard. So there's a lot of conflict in relationships with this position, and there could be power struggles when between them and the person they're with. Now, this is not just in a marriage relationship, but I believe it's much stronger in a marriage relationship because there's intimacy involved, and Pluto is a very intimate planet. It deals with sex and merging and bonding. But also, though, in business partnerships, there can be a lot of mistrust with who they're doing business with, a lot of control and demands and possessiveness around who should, take the lead, and maybe even some control of the money situation. So there can be some challenges even in like business partnerships or just their one-on-one engagements with others. But particularly when it comes to a situation where they're in a marriage or just have a serious partner in their lives, there is a tendency for this conflict to be even more present. They're very invested in having a deep meaningful sexual connection with their serious partners too. So they must feel like there's a connection in this way. Partnerships, though, and especially marriages, can bring huge transformations if they're able to work with Pluto. Pluto in this placement will often bring fated connections to a partner. And a lot of times when we say soul connections and fated connections, people think that or it's misunderstood that the person they meet is meant to be the soul life bonding partner for life. And that's not necessarily so. Sometimes the person that you meet that is fated is just here to show you and help you transform. And that can happen through painful situations. As a matter of fact, most times we get the painful situations in order to force us to transform. So although this can bring in a partner that you have a very soulful connection with, meaning that they feel familiar to you, you feel like you know them at their core, and there's this natural connection that you share. At the same time, if you haven't done the work to heal your own wounding around Pluto, which is going to be linked to relationships in a past life, you're going to bring in the distorted energy of Pluto in the relationship. Once they have resolved the suspicion and the fears and phobias in not allowing themselves to open in a relationship, and they're able to heal at this level, they can make excellent counselors, marriage counselors, because they themselves understand what it took for them to be open enough to have a healthy relationship with another. And so they can be great counselors. Like I said, they're also good at negotiating because this is a Libra house, and also counsel people who have had trauma in relationships. In shadow work with Pluto in the seventh house, relationships can be very volatile, and that's because they tend to manifest the unhealthy version of the relationship until they have done the work to heal. But it is a very cathartic position for the person if they're willing to do the healing work by facing themselves and their own inner urge to have this deep union with others. They first find that or seek that union in themselves, because it's not the union from the other that they necessarily need. It's finding this internal state in themselves where they are merged from a deep part in themselves that understand and can access the love that they're seeking, or from that they're seeking from another person. And when they understand how to face the phobias of turning inwards and accepting themselves, trusting themselves, having faith in themselves, and doing this not from the personality, because like I've said this over and over again, that the personality is not dependable and it's very wishy-washy and always seeking for more. But when you get in touch with this in a deep level and you know this at a soul level or as your core essence, then you're understanding that you can trust yourself. If you can't trust yourself, who can you trust? And you start to understand that you're worthy of investing and investigating and understanding your motives, and then seeing what it is that you don't trust in yourself and why you are expressing it on the other. And once you start to face this in yourself, then healing can begin. And once you heal for yourself first, personally, then you're able to open up and give access to someone else, because you know that the level of trust you have in yourself is enough, and you no longer need to project this mistrust and suspicion onto another person. So this is a very, very intense position, because when Pluto is on any of the angles, first house, fourth house, seventh house, and the 10th house, there is emphasis on Pluto. So he tends to manifest more strongly on angular houses. So this is an area that you can work with Pluto. Pluto in the 8th house. This is another powerful position. Even though it's not on an angle, it's the house that Pluto rules. So, and I believe I have seen it in a few charts where when Pluto is in the 8th house, they're better able to work with Pluto than most other people, because it's a familiar energy for Pluto. So there can be, though, an intense desire for active sex life, or they may want to experience extremes in their sex life. They like to keep things interesting and may want to play like risky sexual games because it keeps things exciting for them. They have a strong magnetic power to control or manipulate money, because this is a money house. Other people's money, particularly, such as loans, stocks, or money from a marriage. They have access to huge resources energetically, because this is an internal state that can allow them to attract externally large sums of money, because this is the house of resources. If there's not so positive aspects to Pluto from this house, then there can be some criminal activity for gains, such as secret money, tax evasion, or money made from prostitution or drugs. This placement can work as a private investigator, work on secret missions. Pluto in the 8th house can have death-defying experiences, like near-death experiences. When it's not so harmoniously aspected, there can be violence and even trauma around being exploited, even sexually. But like I said, Pluto in the 8th house tends to have more autonomy in this house, and they're able to deal with and recover from whatever crisis Pluto might bring for them in this placement. I believe I have met quite a few people with Pluto in the 8th house that have had extreme situations that they've had to deal with, especially younger, but not exclusively. It could be any time, really. Because Pluto rules death and rebirth and transformation, they're absolutely capable of this, because Pluto is very strong in this house. and they also could have experienced death or the loss of a loved one or someone close to them at least once, maybe even several times in their lifetime. But yeah, this is a house that Pluto, although can bring extreme events because Pluto is an extreme planet and he's very strong in the eighth house, the person with this in their chart are able to transform through these difficult crisis events in their lives. In shadow work with Pluto in the eighth house, this placement can have deep transformation and rebirth through healing, which I've said before. And this placement is for magicians. It's like they can magically and intuitively connect with what it is that they need to excavate and find their woundings. And they are able to have this profound psychological shift in how they're seeing things from a more aware perspective in a way that can magically help them to heal their wounds. And if they're able to stay open to exploring and getting access to what Pluto wants to transform in them, they're actually capable of having the internal spiritual alchemy awakened within them. This is the Kundalini energy. It's the house of the Kundalini energy. And especially when a crisis happens, because unfortunately we need crises to wake up. Don't ask me why, but that's what we need. If we're able to work with this, really dig in deep with what Pluto wants us to discover in ourselves at the deepest level, then we can activate this spiritual alchemy within us and we can have a spiritual rebirth. And this is the real pure potential of this house. We can overcome our fear of losses and access the wounds and heal. They're capable of exploring the depths of their being and to have the most profound inner transformation and release the soul from its karmic bondage by healing the wounded past. Pluto in the ninth house shows us where we could have had traumas in a past life, but this happens to be a lucky house. So transformation through healing our own old wounded self is possible. This placement can have dogmatic beliefs, maybe even have obsessions about God and have a fear-based mentality of putting the fear of God into you attitude. They have a natural desire and even passion to learn more about philosophy and religion and even astrology. And they like to research high-minded topics and they have an intense interest for knowledge and of all kinds, not just the philosophical or esoteric topics, even though that is an interest, but people with this placement love to explore anything that brings more wisdom to them, where they can learn more and have a higher education in whatever area it is that they are most passionate about, because Pluto is your passions. This is fantastic for wanting to know more, to gain wisdom, and for higher understanding, because ninth house is about higher understanding, the higher mind, and also knowledge. They could have been in a past life experienced wounding around religion and maybe even the potential of persecutions for their beliefs. So that's why they could either have the attitude of not being interested in anything religious or spiritual, or the opposite, too dogmatic, too extreme about their religious or spiritual beliefs. And this is because the potential of wounding is there. So Pluto wants to access knowledge, and especially deep, lost or forgotten or suppressed knowledge that they want to re-access through research. And they can have this ravenous desire to learn more and know more. And they may have some interest in secrets and hidden knowledge and maybe even want to be able to teach and share what they know. This house also rules astrology and esoterics and higher wisdom and philosophical topics. So there could be an extreme interest in this to the point that they have intense desires to learn more, share it, teach it in some way. And especially if there's wounding around being persecuted for this knowledge, they tend to return to this life ready to really regain what they believe they have lost in an unconscious way, of course. Pluto loves to stir up an intense situation, and they might be attracted to a very controlling mentor or teacher, or that will force them to heal, to break free and transform. They themselves can also be demanding, controlling teachers or mentors. Pluto in the ninth house, like maybe very interested in other cultures, long distance travel and adventure. And they need to be mindful though, especially if there's less harmonious aspects to Pluto when they travel overseas or when they're seeking their adventures, that they try to avoid dangerous situations, especially in overseas travel. Shadow work with Pluto in the ninth house. Overall, this, like I said, it's a lucky house. So this can bring transformation through finding a belief system or by living overseas in a culture that can help them to heal the wounds of the past. They may also experience shamanic healing through rituals that allow them to access their past unconscious memories and to experience profound healing. This house is one of the easier houses that can access Pluto because the ninth house is the house of the spiritual realms where we can get in touch with God or divine forces. And there's access to being able to be guided on a more spiritual level or by spiritual guidance. And this can give them information or wisdom or higher knowledge that can allow them to heal and transform through the process of shadow work. Pluto in the 10th house. This position is about control and power in positions of leadership. They want to dominate, and if poorly aspected, they are very controlling, kind of like a micromanager who wants to manipulate everything and be in control of everyone. Positive aspects can awaken their passionate desires to achieve their passions through the position of leadership. The 10th house is a powerful placement for Pluto because it is on one of the angles, and their drive and the desire to reach their highest potential, because this is the highest point in the chart, will be very strong. They can get access to their Pluto power through healing careers and even careers as being an investor in stocks and also a psychologist or even an astrologer. They can pretty much do any career that they're passionate about because Pluto will help to give them the concentration and penetrating focus needed to achieve their goal. It can bring rise to their career. And until they learn to work with Pluto, they might struggle and try to manipulate and control others so that they can get to that leadership position. They're willing to do what's necessary to get there. But once they start to work with their Pluto, this can be done in a way that is more aligned in what is true to them at their core. Pluto is in the 10th house. This is a public house that rules status and reputation. So it is important they avoid unethical situations. This can cause them to have a huge downfall and be exposed publicly. But Pluto in this placement can bring rebirth and a regeneration so that if you have Pluto in your 10th house, you'll have the willpower necessary to rebuild. even if the destructive force of Pluto takes away everything that you have done, you are able to restructure yourself and transform and have a rebirth in your public life more easily than others might. Pluto is a very dynamic, powerful, and extreme energy. And with this in the 10th house, it is highly unlikely that you would not get back up and start rebuilding again, no matter what has been taken away from you. And with this placement, you can transform your public image, and whatever career you may have started out in, you can escalate into a whole nother direction and still be successful at it. Shadow work with Pluto in the 10th house. This is a powerful placement. Like I've said before, it's the highest point in the chart of your career. So working in a career that offers healing to others can be the most helpful for this placement, because then you're feeding the passions and the desires of Pluto, and you're able to do this in a career. And this way, you're working at least with Pluto in a way that can heal you through your own work. You can even become an expert, whatever field you feel passionate about. If you're able to explore what you feel passionate about and get access to what drives you, then you're able to use this as your fuel to become really good at what you're doing. Like I said, become an expert in what you're doing. And this helps you at a soul level because you're doing something that feels authentic and true to who you are. You need to face your fears of control, because the fear comes from the desire to control. If there wasn't fear, then you wouldn't feel like you need to control situations or manipulate others. So turning inwards and facing this part of you that is trying to always be in control and to be on top and to manipulate others is something that you need to sit with and try to understand why there is that deep desire for that. And you can try this through journaling or just self-investigations, or witnessing yourself as you are trying to control others, or witness the desire to try to control others, and try to understand what this means for you. Deep contemplations in this placement can help to give you access. And by being aware of this desire, you can integrate that in a more healthy way by becoming aware of the excessive, or the extreme need for control. Pluto in the 11th house. Pluto in the 11th house means you can have friends who are jealous of you, or you are jealous of your friends, or power struggles with your friends. The 11th house is also the older siblings, so there can be power struggles with the older siblings or jealousy between you and the older sibling. There can be also struggling with fears of large groups of people, or controlling and demanding friends who want to manipulate you, or you want to manipulate them. You can have powerful friends, or you can move in powerful social circles, or belong to an astrology group, or a group that does magic or black magic, or dabble in taboo topics, or you can belong to a secret society. You can have affluent friends who have powerful influence and belong to groups that are trendsetters that impact society. You might have a passionate desire to achieve your dreams and goals, and you can do this by socially networking with people who have positions of power who can help you. But at the same time, if it's not so positively aspected, this is where you may have fears of feeling powerless in social situations. So you need to learn to work with your Pluto and to heal. And once you have learned to work with your Pluto, it can bring a huge influential, it can have a huge influence and impact in your life and how you're able to succeed. through social groups. There can be massive gains from friendship circles with this placement. So in shadow work, with Pluto in the 11th house, you need to face your fears through social groups or heal the desires to manipulate others. You know, the 11th house is also your tribe. So you might be able to heal through finding people, like-minded people, and conduct some type of healing group that helps you to work with your fears and phobias around social settings. Also, you can heal through your older sibling by somehow understanding what the dynamic is between you and that older sibling, or you and friends in general, and what it is that you resist in them, or what it is that you have fears about in them, or what makes you not trust your friends or your older sibling. Really start to investigate what it is that that is bringing up for you, and allow yourself to explore this at a deeper level so that you can begin to see this side of yourself that may have been unconscious, and also getting reflected out there onto others, and also attracting back friends who are reigniting your reason for not trusting, and also feeling protective and maybe even jealous of your friends. One of the main things that I have noticed with shadow work is that jealousy, especially if that's a focus with friends, is that the jealousy that you project onto the other person is really something that you need to face in yourself, because it's your own lacking, your own feeling of not feeling that you are enough, or that you can live up to the expectations of your friends or older siblings, that's causing you to feel jealous. I mean, that's common for people to even know that. What I'm saying is not uncommon information. But the difference is that when you start to really invite this in by staying inwards and really investigating this in yourself, not by projecting, blaming, and saying what it is that you're jealous of the other person of, but really understanding that in yourself on a psychological level, then you can start to see what it is that you feel is lacking in yourself, that you are projecting onto others, that you really need to own in yourself. Pluto in the 12th house is probably the most difficult placement, and it is ruled by Pisces. And this is also a very nebulous energy. And if you know anything about Pisces, it contains all the energy of all the other houses. So it is not a very easy placement to deal with. It's not even easy to talk about it because there's so much involved. I happen to have Pluto in my 12th house, so I think I can probably speak about it more than most. But even so, it's not very easy to talk about because it rules all the other houses, or it has the energy of all the other houses contained in this one house. So what you can take from that is that if you have Pluto in this house, you have come to heal all lifetimes, all ancestral lineage. Everything needs to come forward on a karmic level to be healed. That is the deepest message of Pluto in the 12th house. That doesn't mean that that has to happen for you, but it means that that's what you agreed to with your soul family, having this placement here. It's sort of similar to the 4th house because that's your family line and your ancestry. Well, in the 12th house, it's that and more. There might be a lot of unconscious energy that you have to work with. And because it's so unconscious, this cannot be worked with on a linear level. We have to get in touch with our unconscious. So you need to work with your guides. That's a house of guides. your spiritual guides, your ancestry line, uh, the angelic forces that will help you, because that's also the energy of the 12th house. Now, it's not easy to get in touch with that, especially if you're not someone that's familiar with working with, your invisible side. But that's what Pluto gives you access to in the 12th house. Pluto in the 12th house is also the house of secrets and abuse and violence, and there can be sexual abuse, secret affairs. You can be the victim of some type of abuse, or you are the one who victimized others. Pluto can be predatorial, so there can be disturbing behavior with this placement. They can be very destructive, and there can be even repressed anger that gets expressed in destructive ways, maybe even through violence and abuse, like I've said. But also, we this energy, sometimes because it's so heavy and hard to deal with, we cope through addictions, self-undoing behavior, escapist behavior, because it's the house of escapism, and also um, unconscious behavior that is really hard to get to, because this is the house of the unconscious, with difficult aspects, of course. These are the more negative ways that it's expressed. Like I said, be abuse, that the abuse doesn't even have to be in this life. It could even come from a past life that you're carrying, because you're carrying your entire ancestral lineage karma of your entire ancestral lineage is in this house. And with Pluto here, you've come with the big desire and urge to heal this. And if you don't, of course, you're going to be more destructive, because the 12th house also is our unconscious mind. So we have self-destructive behavior that we're not even conscious of in this house. There can be, this is the house of losses, so there can be strong themes of death. Also, it's the house of dreams, so there can be nightmares or just restless dreams. There's also fears and phobias around death or disincarnated entities such as ghosts. The veils between the invisible and the visible world are very thin in the 12th house. So it can be very confusing for this placement to even know what's real and what's not. So it's a mental house, so it can cause phobias and panic attacks and even a psychotic break if you're not able to discern the difference between the invisible realms and the visible realms, because sometimes they seem blended. And this can cause a lot of disturbance to the person if they're not psychologically able to handle it, and especially if there are difficult aspects to Pluto from this house. They're also more susceptible to hidden enemies and black magic or being possessed. And it's possible too that in a past life they've been persecuted, highly likely, because they are carrying the karma of their entire ancestral lineage. So it is likely that they will feel like they've been persecuted in a past life. And this may actually become an event in their current life where they are actually facing situations of being persecuted. The 12th house is the house of the invisible realms, like I said before, and it holds all the memories of all past lives and all ancestral lineage and all souls' memories. So all karma is stored in this house and all past memories. Also, this is the house of the Akashic records, the records of all your own life stories forevermore. And all karma and is stored in this house. And with Pluto here, if we don't have healthy ways to cope, then this can create addictions and escapist behavior. So the 12th house also is known, like I said, for self-undoing behavior. and some of it may even be unconscious. If more positively aspected, this placement has psychic abilities and that they're able to handle. And they may have the innate ability or gift to pierce through the nonsense and also notice what others are fearfully holding on to and are unwilling to face in themselves. So this is why shadow work is something that they're usually pretty good at for themselves and for others. If there's something that they need to face in themselves or that they see in others with this placement, they have the penetrating X-ray vision to see into the soul of another and notice their hidden and unconscious motives that may cause self-sabotaging behavior. They can make others aware of what they're unconsciously suppressing and avoiding. But this placement must face their own darkness first, which is way darker than all the other Pluto placements because this is a 12th house. And so it's going to carry the baggage of all the other houses. So this is not going to be an easy process for the person who does shadow work with this placement. Of course, they're going to have to face difficult situations, as if what I've said isn't difficult enough, but there can be, some extreme crisis in their life that will be the breaking point that will allow them to start to work with their emotional wounds. Finally, give them the break that they need to start to work on witnessing themselves. So, with this placement too, they can be very interested in the hidden secret occult topics, and they're actually very good at researching and understanding hidden knowledge. They're likely to have this knowledge from past lives and parallel lives or from other dimensions or other realms. So it's just a matter of them accessing the forgotten or suppressed or unconscious memories. They could have been persecuted in a past life for having secret powers and wisdom. They also can get access to spiritual guides, like I said, and they do get help from the angelic realms, especially if they're working with healing Pluto. So shadow work with Pluto in the 12th house, they're definitely here to work on past life woundings. 12th house, the house of past life and wounds, and Pluto there might have a strong focus on healing. 12th house is the house of healing also. They have to learn to completely release the trauma of all past lives. And of course, this has to be done in layers. No one, unless you have a real active Kundalini awakening that breaks through and sheds all your karma all at once, which of course is going to be a very painful and uncomfortable situation. Unless that happens, this is more gradual. So if you work on this consciously, then you can actually heal layer by layer, lifetime by lifetime, ancestry line through your ancestry line, through your personal line and through your ancestry line, layer by layer, and eventually dissolve many of your wounded patterns. And this eventually does give you access to liberation at some point. Maybe not even in this lifetime, but at least you're getting closer to it. So you could attract painful experiences that will force you to heal. And this placement, though, has agreed that they want to carry the entire generational wounding with them into this lifetime and to withstand the healing for their lineage. The desire to release through deep realizations bring a rebirth and regeneration of the soul's burden, and they're able to transform their subconscious mind and reach the deepest level of profound spiritual healing and alchemy through this natal placement.